Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are at PPUK Podcast. We are going to attempt to do all of the vault material, speak about the vault material. Today with us, we've got Paddy, Leah, and Andy. 1, 2, 3, go.
Sure.
Hi, Paddy here. Oh, go on. Do you want to go first, Andy?
No, go on, you do it.
Paddy here, guitarist from Prince Tribute, Endorphin Machine. Looking forward to getting into some Sign of the Times. What a bright spot this is.
Andy here, ready to talk about pretty much my favourite period of Prince, so I'm quite looking forward to this one.
I'm Leah, and to be honest, I'm just here to hear like Chopin's knowledge on this podcast. I'm just ready to sit and enjoy Chopin's in-depth look.
Oh, I don't know. Andy and Paddy, this is their era. They were. I know it's a weird thing to say about the vault tracks, but they were probably listening to these on scratchy bootlegs before I was a fan.
Well, that's probably
hell yeah.
It's a good place to start, because I think this is the problem of being a hardcore fan, is that you've mortgaged your future when it comes to these sorts of releases. Because and so it's a funny thing, you know, because for the casual fan who's not going to buy the SDE, if they did buy the SDE, they'd be, I mean, some of them will, obviously, but they're getting like 45 new tracks or whatever. For the hardcore fans, you're like, yeah, I've got most of that stuff. So there's an inevitable difficulty immediately with all of these releases, which isn't to sound mealy-mouthed, but I wish I could hear some of these things as if for the first time, and I can't.
Yeah.
But having said that, listening to stuff mastered, even if you've heard it before, is pretty brilliant.
It is, and I will just play devil's advocate and say that sometimes you get used to the tone of a lot of these bootlegs exist in really great quality anyway, and a lot of them don't. But like the ones that your ear gets used to, when you have an ultra clean version of it, sometimes you go, oh, that's kind of not the one with the grit that I knew. Like for me, it happened on Sexual Suicide when it came out on Crystal Ball in the 90s. And I was like, that's not half the song that I knew, because the one I knew had a different colour to it.
Oh, deviating already, but you're so right. The live version of, it is only live recording anyway, as far as I know, but All Day, All Night from the birthday show, I don't like the version on the soundboard anywhere near as much as the first ever version I got, which was about 3 copies removed and a lot more boomy. It's so weird. And
it's like, but you know, if it had been the other way around and you'd had Prince's version first, that's the one you'd love, because that's the one your ear would have, got trained to. So it's, and then you start going, oh, I'm kind of more, what am I saying? I'm more loyal to some bootlegger who's just done this without thinking than I am to the way Prince makes things. Not at all. It's just the songs are so strong, but you tend to love them through the prism you heard them through first.
Yeah. Well, it's more like parental imprint when you're young. It's like, it doesn't, like you're going to fall in love with the person that raises you versus the person that gave birth to you, right? Like it's about what you experience first and as a new thing. I mean, we're talking about mastering and everything else, but the other thing with bootlegs is tape speed. Is actually getting used to some of these songs are a lot slower than you thought, or a lot faster than you thought, because you used to like a 3rd generation tape set and it was copied and copied and copied, and the tape speed drifted. Well, this is old,
I think most of the songs that I knew on here, the speed isn't a problem, but that's right. Even back in the day, I might have said this before, my first ever tape of the Black Album was about 1.3 times as fast. It was really fast. And then later that year, back in '88, I got a proper speed version, and I had to retrain myself, which wasn't hard, because Prince always sounds right when he's at the right speed. He's a master of that solid mid-tempo. Take your time, knock them out without rushing. So, but yeah. So those are all the negatives of being a super fan. The positives of being a super fan is that you get to listen to the greatest music in the world, because it's Prince. So now here we are. Here we are with it all on the menu. So with the caveats out the way, let's see what we got to play with. Huh?
Just to let everybody know, we're doing the vault discs tonight.
Yeah. Oh, if we get through them. So the first one, which is weird enough for all the hardcores that have been listening for a while, was a surprise, I think, to all of us when it came out, and it's the 1977 version of I Could Never Take the Place of Your Man.
Oh, love it.
Go on,
I
Leah.
love it. Do you know what? When that came out, I was so excited that I literally just clicked on the link when it first came on Spotify, and I didn't even look what it was called. I didn't check anything. I just panicked and pressed play. And then it got to, I'd say, less than 30 seconds into it when that track was first released. And I already had pinpointed the year. And I was like, I am so proud of myself. I was like, I can pinpoint Prince by year. But I think it's phenomenal because it is so much of that moment. And I think the fact that I was able to do that within 30 seconds is amazing when you compare it to what it ultimately ended up being. And I sat there for a while trying to work out what it was. What is it that makes that 78? What is it that makes it that different? And it's just everything, but also nothing. It's the whole sound for me was just amazing. And to hear it being so different and being able to compare the two and decide what changes he decided to make made me really excited. It felt like I was in his brain for a minute to see the changes that he made. What about you guys? How did you feel about it?
As I've said before, I just love the weird little disco tom intro. It's like, whoa. And then it went into a version of I Could Never Take the Place of Your Man. Just utterly classic track. Like you say, very interesting to hear it from back then. It sounded a little bit 1979, but it sounded also very as if it was living in multiple time periods, because it resonated forward in time as well. Fantastic.
I think it's really interesting. One of the identifiers for me is like, even if because I read the title, so I knew the year, but it's the guitar tone and the way he played. It's like there's a certain, not to say it's bad or anything, but there's a certain sophistication he picked up along the way and subtlety with his rhythm playing that isn't there in that version.
Which kind of gallops along.
Yeah, just stylistically, and I think it's. I think it's a great. I mean, it's a great version, and
it just knocks me out. It knocks me out that he could write a song as strong as that. And I said this last time or the other time. He could write a song as strong as that. Think that's not what I want to do at the moment. Shelve it for like 8 years, and then bring it out and actually turn it into, I think, one of his best, fullest productions of all time. And like the song, like as a song, even in the 79 version, it's incredibly strong. But if we didn't know the 87 version, we'd just go, that's a brilliant song. That's like Gotta Stop Messing About or something. It's that good, you know. But like to actually sit on it, then remember it and say, I'm going to turn this into an actual, you know, one of the most golden, burnished, beautiful stories that I've ever written is amazing.
It is the constant of these special editions and that aside, and I think most of us already knew, but it's still mind-blowing that he sits on this stuff for years, stuff that would be making other, you know, stuff that, like, if I'd wrote it, I'd just be like, that has to come out tomorrow. I mean, but then, you know, you have stuff on Graffiti Bridge, like The Question of You enjoying repetition, and he did that the same. How do you wait years on that one? How do you wait 4 years on Join Repetition or The Question of You? I guess it's just that you've got so much stuff that...
Well, that's the story of this whole set, right? Which, you know, I don't know if we're going to actually be able to go through every song bit by bit like this, but the story of the set is that unlike the 1999 Vault tracks, which were kind of brilliant, they're brilliant, but they're a more coherent set to listen to. They're easier to listen to because the templates he was exploring were kind of narrower during that time. This whole set that we're looking at now, he's trying out like 8 different projects at once, and there's different flavors there. And so like so he was obviously always cooking up what next, and we know that he was always thinking 2 albums ahead, and he was already recording, the Black Album and Love Sexy and stuff pretty much when some of these songs were going on, and this is only telling one story. It's
amazing. There was so much going on in terms of creativity. It was like this Brownian motion thing, every different direction all the time. Then you can look at it from like a little bit of a Venn diagram type of thing, because you've got the Revolution-esque stuff that had that input and that stuff crossed over with, I've spoken to Wendy and Lisa and had dinner now, and we've got this out the way. I'm going to go and re-record a couple all cold electronic automatic drums and blah, 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 blah. There is so much going on, so much journey, so much emotional movement for him with regard to his band and the sort of creative input and filter that they added. And you really can hear it. This is what I think this is for me, and I might be speaking for you as well, Andy, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. This era, that's why it's so special, because it's one of the strongest eras slipping into one of the strongest eras. It's astonishing.
I do. I think at the same time, my sense of like the Prince community's reaction to this set is a little bit muted. I think it's whacked everybody over the head because there's so much to digest. And like, I do think that like it worked really well in the 1999 edition to just chronologically sequence them. It was fine because, like I say, it's a narrower sort of palette he's playing with at that time. For these ones, I do wish they'd actually sequenced them for flow and for theme, because it looks like, chronologically speaking, Prince was he was at the height of trying out 8 projects on the boil at the time. But I kind of, it was a hard set for me to break down and make my peace with. There's just too much there on first and second and third listens. So
I've got to say, I kind of disagree, not because what you present wouldn't be a great box set as well. I don't think there's any way of not presenting a great box set out of this material. But for me, it helped me come to a bit of a realization about the period and in this chronological, and watching the development and watching him come to a crossroads. And I think it kind of enlightened me in a way. I'm much more, like, how to put it? I understand way more why the revolution had to go, not from a quality or a affection or a great point of view. I just understand from a personal development way why they had to go. And that's from his point of view, not from a fan point of view, obviously.
Well,
a bunch of amazing players, and I'd never kind of sit down, but I understand why it had to be the way it was.
Well, you know what? I kind of agree with that too. That this box set to me is amazing. It confounds me. It's hard to like. It's hard even as a hardcore Prince fan to take in just how much is here. So I agree that having them chronologically tells the story that they wanted to tell for this release. And it has helped me too. But
it's strange. As a Revolution loyalist, the Sign of the Times box set, perhaps as well in hand with the excellent official podcasts, that eight podcast series, which was just stupendously good.
So good.
So, as a Revolution loyalist, this is even, with the exception of possibly still wishing I'd have got Dream Factory before they split up, but this has more markedly underlined that, yes, he really did, irrespective of what I feel emotionally, he really did have his head screwed on and he knew exactly what he was doing to grow. Exactly. And I think since September the 25th and with the podcasts, that's become so much more apparent. It has for me anyway, and I think we all know his history fairly well. But yeah, very much so.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sounding like I'm starting off with a lot of gripes, and I'm not really. I'm just sort of constantly in awe of how many stories you can make out of Prince. That's why we're all with him after all this time, because he's always the most fascinating of any artist that I know to go back to. And just looking at this session, like for me, there's a few tracks on there that I kind of think in my head belong more to Parade, and there's but putting them on here tells a different story about the transition from the Revolution to becoming his own solo artist again. So I can see both cases, but for instance, I'm going to jump ahead to All My Dreams.
Okay.
And to me, it doesn't. I wanted that with Parade. It makes much more sense for me with Parade. It doesn't it's almost a false start on this set for me. It gets lost in the other colours that are about to come through.
Sort of. It's a very viable position. Is that it's all the same period. It's just they've concentrated on the Sign of the Times landing point. So that end of 85, 86, 87 period is all covered here. I mean, I can think of quite a few things that you could pick out that would also be on Parade that aren't here, but yeah, I know what you mean. But I think a lot of those were kind of necessary to complete the other middle album stuff.
I mean,
he carried this song a lot further than Parade. It wasn't like a song that he stopped listening to once Parade came out. This is something that he was still putting on compilations and still planned to release, a good long period after he, was filming the film. So Under the Cherry Moon. So this is obviously, I mean, even though creatively it's of a period and therefore, but so is I Can Never Take the Place of Your Man. But it tells the story, and I'm just happy that I don't have to wait another couple of years for this masterpiece essential outtake to be released. So selfishly, I kind of don't care whether it fitted the story anyway, because I wanted it out. This is one of the best. This is one of his greatest outtakes.
It is, but for me, it throws up a lot of questions about just how you frame things. How a song can get, for me, lost in one context and shine in another. Now, All My Dreams is one of my favourite ever Prince tracks, but I kind of just want it to segue from the original Old Friends for Sale into All My Dreams. That's how I knew it, and that's how Prince definitely sequenced that. So these are my gripes. They're little things, and we can all go and make our compilations off of this, so it's kind of nonsensical anyway, but it's sort of like presented as a narrative of what Prince was and who he was. It's not wrong. It's just interesting how many narratives you can make out of it. And they've chosen a slightly different narrative from the one I would have chosen there.
And I think that's going to be different for everyone, isn't it? It's going to be what you want out of the experience. So I think very much so with this collection, you're taking on Prince's journey. Whereas if it was done by mood or style or genre, that might be more, I think it may have been more palatable to the mass market, maybe, that you could just pop on disc 1 and you're going to get this kind of vibe, and put on disc 2 and you can get another kind of vibe. And I think that would have maybe been more palatable to the less hardcore fans, maybe. And even me, I think I'd really enjoy putting on a disc that's sort of more the Revolution sound, because if I'm in the mood to listen to that sound, it's nice to just put on that disc and let it carry on, or put on the LP and not have to think about it. So I think it depends what journey you kind of are going to be taken on with it, and that's going to be really different for everyone.
But it is. And there's no one answer, but Prince didn't have one answer at any given time either. He was juggling all this stuff as well. And so that, it's all valid. It's all good. So to just use a very blunt tool and say we'll do it chronologically is a fine solution, but I find myself finding it made it more difficult in some ways to appreciate some of the gigantic things that are in this set. I had to break it down and listen to it in different orders.
I don't think there's any way to present this in a really easy, palatable way. It's 13 vinyls. Do you know what I mean? It's 8 CDs. I don't think there's a palette, like a kind of like a smooth, easy palette between them all. I think it's just going to be a heavy full meal. Either way,
yeah, it's an all-you-can-eat buffet, and we keep coming back for more.
Literally, this is gorging on vault tracks,
Yeah,
and also, I mean, you've got things that are similarly like sonically not so different. Things like "Wonderful Day," which to me has got that same kind of vibe as All My Dreams. You know, it's got the same kind of sonic palette, even though it's not it's not a similar song or whatever, but it kind of like fits alongside that.
It's got the Wendy and Lisa hippy dippy trippy stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know I love all this stuff. You know, that this isn't me saying they all just sound rubbish. It's not that at all. It's not.
No.
It's actually a kind of like throwing up of my hands and going, my God, the man made so many stuff. It is infinitely kind of ponderable. You can think about it and think about what you admire in it and think about how it fits together. And he was a jigsaw puzzle, right, at this time, more than any other time in some ways.
I think, to be quite honest, he always was. I mean, you always get, like, you find out a lot of the stuff, there was band stuff, and then he'd go home and record something, and it would just be that he would kind of produce it to the point that they sounded like they go on the same record sometimes. But there was always, I think, a kind of battle between I got my band, I'm hanging out, and I don't need you guys. I think there was always that battle within him. And this is where it came to a very specific head, because I think, like I say, from the podcast, they were getting to an emotional point that was a bit deeper than just hanging around with the guys. And it was getting harder, like when you're really close friends, it's getting harder to kind of, or if you're in a relationship and, Wendy becomes the in-law, it gets harder to kind of make that, I need to be alone now. So I think that's probably, it makes perfect sense that why it came to a head with this one, where in other projects he was able to manage it.
Would you agree that it's like it's way more complex than the 1999 set?
God, yeah,
significantly,
100%.
It is. It's like I feel like it's defying any of us to talk about, and that's not a criticism.
No, I really feel that. No, I see exactly what you're saying. It's the Venn diagram thing for me. You have a certain mindset of looking at, things belong with things, as I do, as Shopes does, as Leah does. But in the end, they're all circles with a big grey area in the middle where they all cross over, because it would sit just as well in Parade, because it does sound like a Wendy and Lisa song, a little bit like Parade.
This is juggling hearts in a 3-ring circus for sure.
Exactly. Let me throw another one out there for you then, as we've done half an hour and done 2 or 3 songs so far.
Okay.
I knew this would happen.
Listening to this set and all of them being properly recorded and mastered makes me wonder even more all these years later how, in a large room with no light, never got onto an official release. What the hell is going on there?
I don't know.
I'm going to be very controversial.
Bye-bye, Chopin.
I'm
afraid that's all we've got time for from Chopin.
2009 was a better version.
Oh, no, it wasn't.
No.
It's a lot more nimble. It's a lot more nimble. And the mix on this one, I understand why this didn't make an album finally. To me, the mix is a bit muddy.
It has life, though. There is something.
It does, but it's not.
It's vibrant. It's amazing. There is, in a sense, that there is a slight thinness to it, even remastered and finished. But it's a thinness that allows it to be flighty. It's like the woman with the big can dress throwing it around. There's something about that track, and I know it's. I know what you're saying.
This song is a perfect example of why I think Prince's truly jazzy era was 86, 87. This just touches on a different class of music than when he would later go on to make, jazz fusion-y stuff, and with that kind of, hey, I'm making jazz fusion, and I know you love the Rainbow Children and News, Chopin, and I'm not dissing it, but to me it's kind of like I'm doing jazz stuff now. Whereas
I would agree with that. It's more purposeful rather than accidenting upon it. That's true.
Yeah, and there are a lot of these songs are my favourite unreleased songs of all time. Well, now they're released, but Large Room with No Light has got it. It seems to touch on some other kind of jazziness that it seems to go. It belong to a continuum of something that, like, you can't even quite place where it's from because it's Prince and it's not that class.
What I think that is because this early in his career, he was starting to dabble more with different styles of music. Later in his career, he's done a lot more of it, and he's been around musicians who are awesome at it. And I think even with Prince, you're going to pick up certain things, certain techniques, certain standards. At this point, it was more about him and what was directly coming from inside than what he'd learned by osmosis in other areas as he went through his career. That's why it's special to me.
My take on this, on the difference between Prince in the 80s and beyond in that respect, is that in the 80s, he was absorbing music like by osmosis, by learning, by experiencing, and he was putting that music through the filter of this strange imagination. And what was coming out was this kind of, loads of musical information put through this filter. And then I think when he later did things, he was putting Prince through the filter of other genres. So I think he was putting genres through his filter in the 80s. And then I think he was putting his own idea of what Prince music was through other filters after that.
I'd buy that.
Yep. But I would say, and I agree with you, and I would say there are some great examples of, like, what you're saying is true, that there's a freer air to it, and it's more experimental, and it's more kind of fun and truer, and more like somebody happening on something, like happy accident about it. I just think this is one example. This is the one example, and probably is the one example I can think of off the top of my head, where it was better that he went away and thought about it. It's still a great song. Don't get me wrong. It's a great song. What gets me with this version is the percussion is just a bit too cluttered and steps on the melody line, and he learned how to tame that down. And this probably could have been tamed down in the mix as well. But for me, there's a couple of times on this, there's a couple of outtakes that are great outtakes, but they just become unintelligible through production. The vocals become unintelligible through production, and this is one of them. However, I must note that end where the do is just stunning on both versions. Because it becomes clear and grooved, and the rest of it is. And with this version, it's just too cluttery for me. It steps on good ideas.
I think it, to me, I love it for that. I love the fantasia of it. It sounds like this kind of absolute falling off the cliff into this new world of ideas. It's taste after a while, as Eric Lee always says.
I have to say, I think I agree with you, Chopin.
I thought we were going to do the 80s versus the rest of Prince fight on another podcast, but
I think this is
not even the 90s. That's 2009.
I know. Well, what else do we like and can fight over in this set? Then there's a lot, isn't there?
I don't think we're going to find much to fight about. I mean, it's pretty awesome. I mean, even that's not a negative that there's a better version later on. Let's make it clear, this is still a fantastic track. And that end groove is just killer.
Here's another one for you then in a similar vibe. And I don't know how this is going to fit.
I know what you're going to say.
I prefer the original version of Strange Relationship with all the weird stuff on the beginning and the more overt Wendy and Lisa stance. I preferred it when I heard it on a bootleg years and years and years and years ago. And whilst I love the one that was on the album as well, I still prefer it now, having heard it even cleaner and remastered.
It's such a great song in both versions. I have massive respect for the Wendy and Lisa one. I think I just like how he made it tougher. And less. He made it tougher and uncompromising, and actually, I would say, it's kind of blacker. Really, is the word for the album version. It just touches on something that's a lot tougher, and I think it fit between If I Was Your Girlfriend and Never Take the Place of Your Man. It's the perfect tone for me on the album. That really just straight ahead kind of. It's not, it's much less friendly, the one on Sign of the Times, in a good way.
I love both. I think with some versions, like some alternative versions that you hear, for me, sometimes I'm like, this is my one, and I'm okay if I don't hear that other version again. But with those two versions, I couldn't pick between them. I love them so much on their own that I couldn't get rid of one of them or say, I won't listen to that one. For me, one day I'll just be in the mood for one, and one day I'll just be in the mood for another.
Yeah, I'm just glad. I'm just glad I live in a world where there are those two versions.
It's an extraordinary song. I think if you imagine the Wendy and Lisa version on the album, Leah, does that seem as interchangeable as your love for both versions?
Good question. It wouldn't fit in. I agree that the right one went on the album 110%. It fits perfectly, and it's exactly what's needed for that point of the album. But for me, I think I just view them as two separate entities. Now they're both in existence. Like I'm happy to cherry pick between the two. And like Chopin said, I'm just happy that they both exist, and I'm in that world where they both exist. But it was definitely the right decision, I think, with what ended up on the album.
They are both sublime, aren't they? I mean, in some ways, I feel like they're not that different from each other. And in other ways, it feels like the mood is just very much, it's hard to put your finger on. What is it? It's just Area, the Wendy and Lisa version, maybe? It's less neurotic. Punchy.
Yeah.
Yeah, the kick. The groove is relying on that kind of wad bass as opposed to the kick, whereas the album version is that pum 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 pum.
The album version is relentless, right?
Yeah, whereas the Wendy and Lisa version is relying on a wow 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 wow, and it's just kind of it's. I mean, they're both. A good song is a good song. I even like the Shep Pettibone mix because I have a thing for. I actually think
it's good.
I know it's dated now, but if that came out at the time, that would have been a classic 12-inch.
I can see that.
Yeah.
People
would have been. They would. It's no more dated than Hot Thing remixes, or You Got the Look, or Housequake remixes.
I got right to the end. And I'm not going to say I hadn't heard it before, because I probably had, but I suspect it's something when you have outtakes and you have varying qualities, you tend to stick to what you get slightly better qualities to for re-listens and re-listens and re-listens. But I got to the end and thought, I'm curious to know what I'm going to think of this. And I absolutely loved it. And I think you're right. I think that would have been a banging 12-inch. Absolutely.
I feel like when it came on and it was like strong, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be an absolute feast. And then I think he actually pulls back from that mix and he doesn't quite go far enough on it to make me really happy, but I like it. I do like it. I wish he'd played around with that voice and made it really spooky throughout. Just like really gone to town on it and made it a sample fest,
I mean, I'm a big fan of Shep Pettibone, as I think I've said before. On previous episodes, like I love Madonna and I love Janet Jackson and all the Rhythm Nation remixes and Express Yourself remixes and Vogue remixes and Keep It Together remixes. They're all Shep Pettibone. and it's just a sound that's the sound of my dancing around in my bedroom, Petty Bones kind of way of remixing. So to me, it was like kind of, oh my God, like putting this song that I loved through that filter, and like how does that sit on the shelf?
I really liked it. It would have made a great 12-inch B-side, absolutely. I do think I feel like he kind of comes in heavy at the start, then backs off for the main body of the song, and then picks up the tail. And I wish he hadn't backed off. I wish he'd been a bit bolder throughout, because it's quite a subtle change for most of the song. He just pumps the drive up a little, but I like it when he starts playing with it more at the end.
I guess because I know that that's his style. I mean, that you get like this intro kind of cutting and beats, and then you get the song.
True.
So it's like, you know, it's still, you can play. Also, it's because a lot of the time his remixes were edited to make the 7-inch mix. So that's something he used to do. And
he definitely does that on Glam Slam, doesn't he? Like basically he sort of keeps his hand off it until the end, and then he goes to town.
Yeah, I forgot he did Glam Slam as well.
I love the Glam Slam remix. I think it's great. And also he gives you those strings twice instead of once, which I'm a fan of. Whoops, we've gone into love songs.
We're really drifting. Okay.
Can I throw in the next song?
Yeah, Prince Bingo.
Dorothy Parker with horns.
Oh, you stole my... Oh.
What do we think?
Bingo.
Absolutely blown away by this, weirdly.
Really?
Yes. Absolutely blown away. I could not get those home parts out of my head for ages. And Rod was driving me mad going around whistling those home parts when we sat down and talked about it. It's really weird as well, because the parts in isolation make me think of like sort of a Gumshoe 70s cop series.
Yeah.
I was thinking murder mystery.
Kind of, yeah. That's sort of superimposed on top of this absolute peculiar curio classic that we've all loved and taken to heart for years. And it works so well. And now I kind of don't know what to do, because it doesn't make any sense to the majority of people who are likely to listen to anybody play it. But oh my goodness, it is good. Go for it, guys.
I prefer this version.
Hey, somebody said it.
Originally, I wanted to go into the master recording and go, right, it's too high there and too high there. I reckon if you there's a couple of notes that step on vocal lines, but a couple of times. But if you kind of like brought the volume down and brought it back up, like if he's like, it's quite clear that he never seriously considered these horns, because there's a couple of things he probably would have done that would have, but if he had, this to me is like the 93 version of Old Friends for Sale. They're both great tracks. They're just different vibes. I think it's probably for the best that Dorothy Parker, I don't think Dorothy Parker would have been a classic if this was the version that came out in the same way. I don't think it would have had the same emotional pull. But I fucking love it. And those horns are Let
me be clear. The right one is on the album. I'm not.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I find it interesting. So, like, you prefer the horns, but the right one is on the album, correct, Chopin?
Yes. In the same way that Get Off is the best song for the Diamonds and Pearls album, but Violet the Organ Grinder is a better song.
Interesting. Okay, so I'll halfway agree with
Paddy?
Yeah.
I'll absolutely agree with you that the right one is on the album, but I won't say that I prefer the horns one, because I don't, but it's fascinating. Prince 100% made the right call. The horns step on the narrative. It's a narrative song, and the horns are like, you know, it's a dream song, and the horns try and take you. You know, it was only because he asked Eric to have a go. Even Eric said that, why do you need horns on this one? You know, but he put some beautiful stuff on there, but it just gets in the way of something unique and boutique and strange. I will say something really that occurred to me, though, is that I like it, but as a curio. So glad it's not on the album. What's interesting to me is the way the beat works, especially with those really tasty lines at the start. It sounds a lot like 4 years ahead of its time, jazz meets hip hop, Tribe Called Quest. It sounds like the Low End Theory or something. Mm-hmm. So like the way that beat works with those very jazzy horns sounds like it preempts like Gangstar, Tribe Called Quest, all sorts of things. So that's a very rare groove, but it wasn't what that song needs. I think it's an interesting side effect.
It's weird, actually. This is such an interesting one. You brought this up, Leah, because it is. So I knew talking about this would be such a split. I didn't know I'd have so many people on my side that it was a great version, but. This is one of the... Dorothy Parker was never anything I wanted to get my hands on the 24 track for, like, and have a go at mixing. It was never really kind of... Because it was just like a perfect mix. This... And in that way, Andy, you're right. It's the perfect version for the album. It is a statement in itself. This, because it's an overdub that was never kind of given the due thought and process... I really want to get in there with the reverbs and the flanges and stuff like that and make this as dreamy as the song is. Because I think you could make this as dreamy as the song is.
Here's what I would do if I had the 24 track,
Mute the horn.
You got it. All the sliders with the horns on I'd set to 0, but I do like it. I go, whoops, it's the original song again.
Knew it.
I think this stuff is fascinating. Like, here's another thing about Prince, right? When they release special editions of other artists' stuff, usually they don't have that much to work with. What you get is 4 different takes of, you normally get 4 different takes of "You Can Call Me Al" or whatever the song is or whatever the artist is, right? And that's great, and it's. With Prince, we know for a fact that they could put another issue out of, different takes of the album. They've barely done that here because there's so much else that has to be addressed first, like the 5,000 other songs he made at the time. So, like, you could probably make a whole double album set just out of alternate takes. And
are you suggesting a special edition of the special edition?
Well, I'm suggesting a special edition of Sign of the Times at some point that's about, that's more... it's not something that I desperately want or need, but I'm just observing that, like, with Prince, again, it comes back to this, it's an embarrassment of riches. Honestly, other artists' super deluxe editions are 5 versions of the same album.
Hey, it makes it clearer why he wrote "Slave" on his face to me. Like when you're sitting on all of this, whether you agree with the point about the business side or whatever, you can understand how somebody with this much stuff is frustrated. But also, this is not a criticism of anyone. It's just an observation that Prince was a unique musical kitchen. In the same way, it was inevitable that the revolution had to go, despite them being a good thing for him. It was inevitable that the way he worked with record companies had to go, even though they had worked for him. It's just one of those crossroads in his career that, and this points to a specific one, but quite pointedly leads to the second one, not only because of the amount of stuff, but also because of the editing crystal ball into Sign of the Times. This crossroads led to another one, and this box set does a fantastic job of pointing that out.
I agree. I was sounding quite down on it. I'm not. I'm just. This is one era where you cannot force it into one narrative. Other narratives keep suggesting themselves.
It's with all the other stories that this box set tells.
Yeah.
One of the clearest and loudest is Warner Brothers did him a massive favour by saying, no, that 3-disc set needs to be something else off your pop. And then we got Sign of the Times.
Agree strongly.
You can't... There is a subjective amount of in that comment, but for me,
no, I
it
think
really, really does underline how.
I think all you need to do is go back and listen to the album itself. It's such a beautiful, beautiful solution to how to sequence a patchwork of this.
Yeah.
When you've got 100 patches to choose from, which 16 do you choose? And it's a beautiful sequence.
I mean, takes interestingly, the last time we were talking about the Sign Times box set, something came up for me. I was just like, when I saw the Eggplant was on there, I was like, how are they going to get around the line where Wendy calls her retarded? Which is, like nowadays, if they're doing removing the rape reference from Love and Sex, from Lust You Always and Extra Love Ball, and that's why they won't release those. And it's interesting that they picked a version with Prince's vocals that didn't use that line. And when I heard that, I was just like, wow. So, like even a song that you think and even a song that you've been listening to and that and you think that there's a problem with, or that's the lyrics. Well, no.
I love that song. My first listen to Eggplant, I was very surprised that it wasn't Wendy singing when I heard it on this set. And I really love Wendy's vocal on the original, on that version of Eggplant. And I almost think, I was like, I prefer the Wendy version. Over time, I've come to appreciate this new Prince vocal. Well, new to me. I think it's such a, this is Eggplant's a great song because it's a comedy song.
Yeah.
And so if Wendy's singing about being retarded in the original, to me, she's playing a character who is talking trash.
Oh yeah, I wasn't saying that she wasn't, and that I wasn't saying that it was, but I'm just saying in the point of view of, because
political correctness.
Yeah, exactly, because they were removing those songs before.
I don't know. I think you can't assume that's like in Jealous Girl. He sort of says, "I'm going to burn your face off" or something, which is
it's not really political. I wasn't about. Yeah, which is kind of interesting that they wouldn't use the other references.
So I mean, I think. I don't know. I don't know that they. My suspicion is that they included the Prince Eggplant here because people want more Prince, and because the Wendy version of Eggplant was circulating. But
also, there's been a lot of Wendy vocals and Lisa vocals on this compilation.
Yeah,
not that that's a bad thing. It's because it is the time and it makes sense. But
the song itself is fantastic because it's so peculiar. It's just peculiar. No one else writes a song called Eggplant. That's just first, right? Okay. Secondly, no one calls other people eggplants. It's not even a song about eggplants. It's a song about calling a woman, and you're like, what? It's just so oddly Prince. And then, but the most important thing about the song is just that the melody is so unusual and peculiar. It's great. It's like a nursery rhyme from another planet. I love it.
Which kind of leads me to, I know this, what might be a controversial view is, I think he was learning so much from Wendy and Lisa, and they had these kind of playful Baroque kind of, melody lines that were kind of not the ones that he would write in a very different melody line. And I actually think that he was learning so much, like things like Everybody Want What They Don't Got, which is basically Penny Lane by the Beatles, in another form. And I one of my things is I think he was hearing himself and the whole Revolution thing becoming far too retro-referential. And because if you have a look at something like Witness for the Prosecution, the Revolution version, which is the better version, but when he goes and redoes it by himself, you can tell the difference in the sound, that he was kind of like, okay, I'm kind of looking back a bit too much now. Because of the learning process and because of the learning new things that I'm.
This is the start of Prince stripping streamlining his melodies and making them more angular and linear.
Yeah.
I think, and taking away from those big curvy, like you said, Baroque melodies, and he's saying, I've done all that. I want to, and like, this is the point where Sign of the Times is the fulcrum before he starts veering off into more, like, Love Sexy is much more streamlined, much more straight ahead groove and kind of linear melodies.
It's definitely after the famous Tea Together and Goodbye, the paradigm shift was there. I think I'm right in saying one of the very first songs he went and recorded was Shockadelica, and if you listen to that, it's like, oh my God, something. If you hadn't have heard anything at all that came after Shockadelica, and you'd heard everything he'd recorded prior to it, I think it would have been a more stark contrast of, whoa, something here has changed big stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
It feels like he's determined to put his head down and bulldoze through songs with a different template now.
And I think Sign of the Times was another one that was very soon after they split, wasn't it? Sign of the Times crossed.
So, they talk about, basically you're talking about, if you know this term, horizontal versus vertical melodies. So like in the Beatles, Paul McCartney wrote very vertical melodies. They go up and down the scales. And John Lennon was much more about drony horizontal melodies, like Strawberry Fields sits on a couple of notes, right? So it literally, if you looked at it written out as music, you wouldn't see the notes going up and down so much. You'd see a more horizontal sitting on a, like, dun, 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 no one I know is in my tree. That's like two notes, yeah? And I think Prince starts to embrace that more horizontal attitude. Because he's Prince, he still goes into like orbit at times on his vocals for sure. But I think he starts to muscle down and strip down songs like Witness, like you say, Shopes, and turn it into something that's more like driving a train of hard funk.
Also, the snares and the hi-hats and the like reverbs in the drums become a lot tighter.
Yeah.
You get a lot more space back in the mix. Like you kind of
going for something less splashy and less flouncy, right?
Yeah.
And although I would like to talk about a song which I think might be getting overlooked by the Prince folks, or maybe not, by the fans. I might be wrong, but I really love it. It's just terrific, and it is Love and Sex on this set. It's an amazing song. It sounds like if Prince and Freddie Mercury had a baby. And to me, that actually sounds like a throwback to the kind of big melodramatic, blousy things he was doing around end of 1999 and then Purple Rain era, where he was making it sounds more akin to something like Another Lonely Christmas than this new straight ahead funk thing. It's great. I'm not getting a lot of nods from the gang here, but I think it's a terrific song.
Leah, what did you think?
It's not, for me personally, it's not one of my standout tracks when, as you mentioned, it not really getting a lot of shout in the community. For me, there's a lot of other tracks that jump out at me when I look at that. It is a little bit, for me, of a skip track.
That's all right.
I like it. I think what Andy's getting at, I do agree with. It's a bit one of the slightly overblown, ostentatious-y type things. But similarly, I would probably gravitate towards other tracks, if I'm honest. But good addition.
Well, I got to say that, like, there's a lot of songs here, and songs that I missed at first then turn out to have a lot more to them than I think. Yeah. And some songs
some of them grow on you.
Yeah, and I would like to put a shout out to anybody who's listening to, if you go and give Love and Sex another 3 chances. It's beautiful. It's a really chunky, dynamic, beautiful composition. I think it's great.
Can I add something to Love and Sex that for you, when next time you listen to it, Andy?
Yeah.
And this is not a negative or anything like that. To me, it sounds like it belongs on Emancipation, like a savior or friend, lover, sister, mother, wife. To me, it sounds like an emancipation ballad.
This is where I'd be cheeky and say, if you put it on Emancipation, it'd immediately become the lead single. Ooh, 80s guy, sorry.
When's that 80s versus 90s come in? When's that podcast happening?
It's just, I understand what you're saying. It sounds like Saviour or something, but to me, it's always, the stuff from this era, the sound and the feel of it it's just where my ear's at, Chopin. It's like, this is the more inventive era to me, and it sounds... I
wasn't saying anything about that. I'm just saying that sonically, that song, to me, if you put that on disc 2 of Emancipation, it wouldn't stick out. Like, if you put anything else from this disc, like Rebirth of the Flesh or anything on Emancipation, it would just be like, well, what's that doing there? But this one, it would just be like, oh.
It would stick out to me if you didn't change a note of it and stuck it there. It's just sonically, it does sound different to me. It's just the arrangement of it is just, I pretend I'm in Prince's head listening to this one. I just think he wanted to go back and do what he used to do for 10 minutes. That's just my take on it. But it was, there's a lot of tracks on this set that I just instantly thought, okay, that's what that is. And then as it went on, they've opened up to me. And like Love and Sex has been a real sleeper hit for me. And there are others too, but that one's, it just, I like this song. I don't feel like any of you are qualified enough. You all skip it by your own admission.
I didn't skip it. I just put it on a different album.
I know.
No, it's no mark on the quality. I mean, it's like, I know when you're up against some of the powerhouses on either side of you on this one, maybe in 10 lessons time, I'll be with you and I'll be saying, Andy, you're completely right. But
well, I didn't write the thing.
Yeah,
I wish I had, but it just makes me happier and happier the more I get into it. Who else wants to pitch a song so I can shoot it down in flames then?
I've got one that hasn't been getting a lot of love, but I absolutely adore, and that's Train.
Okay.
See, now I'm not getting that many nods.
No. Always love Train. Train was one of the heavy circulators over the years in decent quality. Fantastic track, to be honest. Bit too light for Sign of the Times, etc., etc. Sits very well on early configurations, Crystal Ball and what have you. Not Crystal Ball, sorry, Dream Factory. I really love it. I love the squelch in the same way as I love the bit of squelch that's in Strange Relationship. It's a banging little odd pop tune. Love it.
It's nice. Sometimes it's just nice to have something quite upbeat and happy. Like, it's one of those songs that I put on and I just feel good. Like, it doesn't have to have some intense purpose. It just makes me feel good every time I hear it.
I like it fine. I like it very fine. It doesn't do the extra special stuff for me. Is all.
Right.
And that, but I mean, these we're picking and choosing between many, many treasures here. It's a very, very nice chocolate box, to steal the name of an old Prince bootleg. It really is there are a lot of nice selections here. What do you think of Train, Chopin?
Do you know what? You say that it doesn't give you that special thing. I said it doesn't consistently give me that special thing, because sometimes when that, it's the bit, the call and there's a nice little call and answer session. The bit where the vocal goes, "I'll be with you," as an answer. It's like, there's a train that's in the morning. It's a great little. Yeah, I do love it. Actually. I mean, it wouldn't be the one that I'd list first off, but as the tune goes, my body starts to rock as I imagine that do 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 do, and that kind of clavinet line. Yeah. It's a great song. What can I say? But this is the problem with the box set this big.
Yeah.
even a song like Train can get lost.
Absolutely.
A box set this big. I mean, and like, how many more actually fantastic songs have we not even coming to mind yet? Like,
I know. Oh yeah, we've got nowhere, as I knew we would.
yeah.
I like this pitching song stuff though. Chuck one in that you want to talk about. Maybe. Or is it Chopin? Is it your round?
If somebody's got something to, okay, I'm gonna pitch one that everybody's gonna be, all you guys are gonna be happy that I'm giving love. I'm guessing, and it's Soul Psychedelicide because this is why I love the Revolution. Like when we're talking about all of the stuff, we're talking about, you know, like 80s versus 90s. Ultimately, I love both. But when I think about the Revolution, and when I think about what's the Revolution, the thing that the Revolution do best, and it's like ice cream, and an hour later they're still on the same groove, and it's just. This is the sound that Prince built his sound on, and I love it.
I really want Prince shouting ice cream as my text ringtone.
I would now suggest that we petition that all ice cream vans are Prince. Instead of green sleeves, you get up of a summer's day and you hear ice cream, and that's the ice cream van.
And it's like, if anybody was going to kind of make an argument that Bobby Z doesn't get enough love, it's that
it's so Bobby, and it's just like, it's so on the nose, and that's what makes it fantastic. It swallows its own tail. That's how good it is.
Yeah, it's like Bobby. It doesn't need any. It's like chlorine bacon skin. It doesn't need anything more than what it is.
It's terrific. And then what's going on around it as well, though, the rest of the rev, huh? Yeah,
it's just...
And so this is where, again, another example of how you can never show someone what Prince is with one postcard or 10 postcards or 100, because we all know there's an hour version of that there.
Yeah.
And like, I would happily listen to the hour. They could have released a one-off 1 hour version of Soul Psychedelicide as a Prince release, and it would have been amazing. So as amazing as the 12-minute version is, I'm like, that to me is the frustration of trying to put Prince in a box or a box set. It's all great.
That should be a record store day release on its own.
Soul Psychedelicide, hour long.
1 hour, stacks of wax.
4 sides, 15 minutes a side. Done.
Except I'd have to buy 2 record players and do the
only problem with 4 sides is you wouldn't want to stop to turn it over, would you? That's the whole point.
No, we'd all have to buy 2 copies and buy double decks and be the DJ.
That makes sense.
But like, honestly, it's like it sounds great at 12 minutes, but it sounds great at an hour. So what a terribly arbitrary thing to have to do as a archiver. No archivers of other popular artists really have these problems.
Well, the length of it, I think, is more determined by the fact that you can hear on the hour-long version, he says, start recording now. So with a 24-track tape, it's not like kind of like 2-track tapes. If this is a recording to a 24-track tape, it's only going to be 22 minutes long, 21 minutes long. So they're only going to have, it's like America 21-minute version. It's pretty much the length of the 24-track tape.
Oh, so this is 12 minutes, yeah. So this is what you're saying. Like, okay.
Because if you listen to the hour-long one, I haven't listened to it the whole thing for a couple of years, but I seem to remember, because I remember him giving commands to punch in and punch out, and I remember when he said that, I was like, God, I'd love to hear that mastered. I'd love to hear what's on that 24 track, like what he does with that 24 track. How did he overdub it? Did he make it a song? And like, did he record another verse or something? But actually just left as it is.
So this is kind of Prince's on the fly edit anyway.
I imagine so. Actually, yeah, I think that's what this is. I mean, don't quote me on it, but
I'll buy that. I'm saying there's a point at which I don't mind if I'm hearing something that's not 24 track. If it's like, you know, I would still happily listen to the hour, even if it wasn't all done on 24 track.
well, his sound guy was so good at creating 2-track mixes that actually it doesn't matter because they were. I mean, those sample boots of those rehearsals, they are a great mix. I mean, I'm not entirely sure how much the 24 track adds unless you're actually going to overdub stuff onto it, but it doesn't seem like he did.
But I'll tell you something. I think we all love this at whatever length, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So I'm still the only guy who's just batting 0.
Like you say,
I'll go on.
It's distilled and bottled revolution at its best. Brilliant.
I would agree with that.
So go on then. Another one for me is the guitar type chap, and because the more I listen to it, the more I hear him channeling John Frusciante years before he was probably born. Is Blanche. The sort of nuts, gentle, free. This is for me where the freedom of his playing. So bear with me on this. So a few things have happened recently that have brought up these ideas of who's the best guitar player when we've lost dear old Eddie. Big thing for me, I have to say. But these discussions have been going on, and my opinion about Prince is, no, if you had granted it's subjective and there are lots of different aspects to playing the guitar, and it's inevitably mixed in and out of songwriting ability and all these kind of things. As a pure guitarist, Prince isn't in the top 10 of the absolute best guitarists of all time. To me, I almost want to say, of course, he isn't in a sense, but.
Do you mean technically?
I mean, if you took sort of holistically, if you took all the aspects of guitar playing, I wouldn't put him in the top 10 world. Now, if you talked about, there's a podcast here, so let's not go mad. There's if you talked about like rhythm playing, I think there's more arguments to be had if you sort of consolidate it down to things like that. But anyway, the thing about Blanche is it speaks very much to his playing in that it's just like complete, I don't know, it's like complete freedom. He's kind of not thinking, but going exactly where he wants to go. There's no effort. It's just a oneness of the thing that is centrally Prince and picking up a guitar and going. And that is what I love about this track. And the weird thing that makes me think of John Frusciante's playing is a little bit similar in a sense. But and again, it's a track that's sort of light, sort of a bit of a daft, to quote a sort of Yorkshire quote. And I love that because he's playing. And Prince, it gets very confusing if you say playing and playing. Prince's guitar playing, when I used to sort of watch bootlegs of him doing the long drawn out solo of sort of Head on the Dirty Mind tour, he's just floating around. There's no, you have other people who do sort of impressive things that are working at it, have drilled it, have done A, B, and C. Prince's guitar playing is basically from his emotive center to his fingers and out through the speakers. No filter, no plan, it just goes. And Blanche really, really makes me think that. And as I was listening to it in the context of I'd say, recent guitar conversations, Blanche sort of stood out for me for those reasons.
It's interesting you talk about the greatest guitarists and everything like that. I think what makes him an amazing guitarist, and I'm not going to go into who's the best and who's the best, but you mentioned Eddie Van Halen, who absolutely phenomenal, fantastic guitarist. But if you listen to that Beat It guitar solo, that's composed by cutting apart like an hour of playing. You know, like, yeah, it's like it's post-constructed into these great solos, as opposed to, even if what Prince wasn't doing was technically the best or the most innovative, what he could do was compose on the fly in real time And I think he did that, and not just guitarist. I just think as a musician, he was someone who could compose in real time. And I think the way he structured his bands as well and got them to answer to hand commands and stuff was testament to that. And I think you can hear that I think you're right. You can hear that in Blanche. And I think there's a couple of other songs like that. And I've mentioned it before, it's like Chlorine Bacon Skin, and maybe even like De Bourgeoisie, where these, and My Medallion, they're these kind of stories that just flow from nothing. And even Cocoa Boys, actually, they just kind of, these, you can feel the actual flow of inspiration in the same way that you could hear Hendrix flow. Even if,
and again, it's not. I can hear the people who are just Prince fans to the point of anybody who says anything is evil. I can hear that. I mean, I can happily say that if the Sign of the Times box set doesn't show that this guy was the most talented all-round writer and player and live performer, for me, it strips away any logical argument completely. Because if you take it on its own, it's good. If you take it with everything else, it's just like, come on.
What did the old promo say? Makes Michael Jackson look nailed to the floor.
Michael Jackson was a song and dance man. One that whose music I love, but it was a song and dance. Anyway, we really are going into.
Yeah, I can diverge on that. But listen, I hear your points, and I kind of don't, the greatest ever and what have you, I don't really kind of get into that, because a lot of the times, unless you're talking about a defined aspect, it becomes about who's your favorite.
There is a podcast there then, because
controversial.
We'll do a side chat about guitars. But
Prince just makes weird choices all the time, and they don't sound like other people's choices, and that's what separates him.
Mm-hmm.
His voice, not just his voice of his singing voice, but his voice, what he has to say on any of these instruments, is frequently surprising, always surprising in this phase.
Also, with the vastness of this box set, this doesn't cover his full creative. Like the vastness, you have something that's this big, this expansive, covers an era-defining album, the change between two bands, it's got outtakes, it's got releases, it's got remixes, it's got a live show, and it doesn't even begin to cover the full breadth of what he did.
It's nowhere near, is it? It's so berserk. And that's what I mean. It doesn't have the Flesh sessions. It doesn't show you Madhouse. It doesn't show you the Black Album. And I'm not saying it should, but it is so hard even to show people the overview of what Prince was. Nothing does it except exploring everything. That's Prince. If you want to know how great he was, you have to just look at everything and then try and paint a picture. And even then it confounds me half the time.
I kind of get why some people can't get. I totally get it. It's the same way that with acts like Sun Ra, I don't have a way in. I've always found it too intimidating to even begin dissecting someone like that. And I think to a large extent, like we said earlier, Frank Zappa as well. Sometimes it's just too big.
The funny thing with Prince is he made loads of ways to invite you in. He made things that were irresistible, like Raspberry Beret and Kiss, and When Doves Cry and Purple Rain. And he goes, come in. But when you get in, it's like, there's quite a lot of other shit here too. And that frightens off some people. And other people are like, oh no, you're in the spider's web now. You are going to come with me, because you've got a lot of other places to look at. But
it's highly unusual. You have such proficient musicianship and pop timeless pop anthems that sold millions. There are plenty of musicians out there who are stunning, but they couldn't write a song to save their life.
And there are some other musicians out there who make big pop songs, and that's it. That's the end of the story. Prince was.
And both is a great career to have. To have either one is a great musician, and it's a great skill. But it's interesting that several times we've talked about crossroads and, you know, and kind of internal battles. And I think that was another one. Like, you know, am I a musician? Am I a song and dance showman? Because he was both. I mean, there was times when really, you know, he dropped all instruments for the parade tour and was a song and dance man, band leader, James Brown-esque.
Yeah.
And then, you know, there's some tours where he's just like, he's using every opportunity to pick up every different instrument. And it's like...
Well, that's interesting, because another thing, partly prompted by all of the really good narrative that's been built around this set and the podcast and the book, but partly because there's been so much material for me to get my head around, I had to stop listening to it like it was... you know, the magic gifts of the guy we like best, you know, this magic bestower of magic. And I started listening to it, calming down a bit and listening to it like, this is a 27-year-old man. And he doesn't know what's coming next. We know what's coming next, and we know everything that came next because we know everything he made now, you know, more or less. But this was somebody just looking to decide where to go next. And when you start breaking it down and listening to it as, here's a 27-year-old man, a superb, an extraordinary one, figuring out some ideas, then it humanizes it again. And then I start to really listen to the songs. Prince gives you so much, it's really easy to just quickly chew one, go, green opal fruit, oh, it's starburst now, green starburst, spit that one out, purple starburst, spit that one out, oh, revels, a bag of revels. And we get quite lazy about, you just go, yeah, give me the next one, blow my mind with this, blow my mind. Stop and go back to everyone and think about an actual human being singing them, and let the song come down off its pedestal and decide if you like the song again. And that's when they open up to me, not when I'm blasted with 70 tracks here or whatever, and we've all got a lot of expectations about them.
Well, I mean, it's kind of interesting you said about kind of like listening to a song and thinking about another, and it's just like you're thinking, oh, I know what comes next, because like I was listening to, when the dawn of the morning comes, is a great little track. I love it. It's like what a day. But part of me was singing Trust. Who do you?
Oh, I was about to say it sounds like the prototype for Trust.
Yeah, and it's just it's like we've said before about I mean, there are these songs that probably didn't get released because they're seed tracks for 4 or 5 different ones, and people would know it all was just like he made, you know, he took this idea and that idea and that idea, and he took 4 from the one song. There is
this pressure to look at every song and go, is that as good as If I Was Your Girlfriend? Is this as good as Forever? No, this is Prince's musical diary. These are the songs, you know, he didn't select. It doesn't mean they're bad, but they're not what, if you go into them going, you know, have I got 5 alternate classic albums here? No, that's not exactly the point.
Also, the creative process isn't as clean as that. It isn't you go in there and you write your hits. You know, like the creative process is, I had to write those 3 mediocre tunes, the 2 bad ones, and the 5 kind of great ones to make the life-changing one. Yeah, you know, that's the creative process. I mean, it's not as clean, and that's what this box set does a really great.
So it does, but I think you have to slow down and like go on a deep dive into a lot of these songs to get just to bring it down again. Go, this is a song. What's happening in the 4.5 minutes here? Do I like it? Not, you know, and then I start liking them. and you know, for me, the best Prince music has always taken its time to reveal itself. And one that I do want to talk about is, you know, is Cosmic. We've talked about it a little, I guess, before. Cosmic Day. I did not think much of it at first. I couldn't hear what was interesting about it. And the more I listened to it, it's one of those magic songs for me where you just go, I don't even think I remember that 2-minute section. That was never there until my 20th listen. And you just go, because you just don't, and you just go, great. It's got a beat and it's got another beat going, and then at some point you go, no, hold on. I understand the language of this song now. And I love the shape of it. I love the way it seems to regenerate itself like a battery that gets recharged halfway through. the actual solos in it are so easy to overlook if you just go, yeah. Never take the place of your man, squealy. No, slow down and let it go through you. It's an amazing song. Love the song.
It is. I love the mechanical relentlessness of it, but it doesn't feel like it's relentless. It's strange.
Well, this is one of the ones where we're not talking about a horizontal melody. This melody skips up and down all over the place, more like something like Good Love or something. So this is and also like the fact that it was Camille-like, but actually it was actually not as subtle as Camille. It almost goes into like he's trying to make a female vocal out of his vocal here, or something. And I didn't like that at first, but now. I don't even know how to start describing something like Cosmic Day. It's so strange. And at first it sounded like it was bereft of ideas to me. And now it sounds like I don't even have the vocabulary to know what it's about, but I love it.
Yeah, I can't really add to what has already been said on this track. It's one that did have to grow on me. 100%. It wasn't one of those instant, I love it. But I think I'm just about kind of getting to the point where you guys are. And I think I'm on a couple more listens and it will fully have set in. But the claws have kind of just hooked in with me with that track. Really, I'm finally starting to understand it.
Like even the way the third verse, the melody of the third verse is a variation of the tune of the first two verses. There's so much, I don't know. I'll talk about it. It's great.
Yeah.
It's really weird, the groove, because the kick drum is so thin that it sounds more like a foot tapping on wood, like those sound effects stepping, than it does like a kick drum. And a lot of the grounding in the groove just comes from a kind of like a percussive kind of pluck at the start of the bass line, and that's what kind of roots it in groove as opposed to that bum 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 bum, because it's so light. But it's also, this is one where, because I got the vinyl box set and I've got a vary speed on my decks, that I was just too curious. What does it sound like at the speed that he recorded it at?
Uh-huh.
Oh my God. I get it's the more interesting and more inventive track when you speed it up, but it's a solid groove when you slow it down a bit. It's really good. I loved. I was just. I don't know if it's just like kind of like the listening to something new, or something the same in a different way, but it's. I mean. And therein lies the other thing, the choices that he had to make about all of this, the horns in the Ballad of Dorothy Parker, the fact that you've got a good song, whether you speed it up or slow it down, what's the good song, what's the great song, it's overwhelming being presented with this stuff, let alone actually being presented with it and having to make sense of it and then
does anyone
down to an album.
Does anyone here feel like they've fully digested this set like a month and a half after having it?
No.
I definitely haven't. I mean, I'm much closer than I was, but there's still so much to think about, God damn it.
I think it's not so much the amount of stuff that's on here, because if this was like this much, if this was now 53, or whatever, and it had this many discs of pop music, I would have dissected it by now.
But that's because they're all of those on something like Now 53, you're essentially listening to songs that are made to be listened to and not thought about that deeply. They're pop hits, and I don't mean that in a disparaging way. They've got broadly the same remit.
But that's my point, is that you will have, easily digestible, made to be easily digestible music. There's plenty of easy to digest music on this, and I think actually, weirdly enough, the ones that are easier to digest are actually getting weirdly not as thought of in some way, because they're not, you're not thinking about them, therefore, you're passing it on to the next kind of conundrum. Like Teacher or Train, like they're really easy digestible songs, but it's that In All My Dreams, or Cosmic Day, which aren't as, even though the fact that you've heard a lot of these songs before, like Power Fantastic, like I love that song. Oh my God, the version on the hits. Oh my God. Clearly, it's up there, one of the most emotional and powerful Prince vocals. So
one of my favorite Prince songs ever.
Yeah, it's just stunning. I that's another one that I want to see the 24 track just to deconstruct what's going on, in where's the magic in all of that in the recipe.
I'd love to add the horns from Dorothy Parker to Power Fantastic. No, not really.
But then what you do is you take off those really well, those beautiful vocal performance and give us like kind of the raw guide vocal and take away some of the gloss in the production. And then you're like, somehow you've revealed something else and the magic is just as beautiful.
I like this vocal take a lot.
Oh yeah. I think, it's a different vocal take than the one that's on the hits, but it's...
Is it, I haven't worked this out yet. Is it actually, or I haven't compared, is it the same arrangement take? Is it the same musical take? Or is it?
I think so, yeah. It's just that kind of warm-up thing was on the bootleg, but it wasn't on and it was on the early configurations, but they cut it off for some reason for the hits.
So the backing to the song is the same, we think, as the hits version, and it's
the
instrumental stuck back on, and it's got an alternate raw take, vocal take.
Yeah, it's a lot of the reverbs are taken off of it. I think is the difference. That's why it's a drier mix. So it's kind of they're trying to give you this is what it sounds like raw in the studio. Basically, like
I'm very happy to get that full story in the podcast.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys all heard it, the full story about them all being in the studio and the raw vocal take. Oh, what I'd have done to have been in that room and heard Prince's vocal for that track be laid down, just nothing but his vocal. Oh, it'd have been incredible. Very jealous.
I mean, again, there's a song that you look at it and you go, how was it not released on something, right?
Yeah. Why was that just like a kind of like a bonus track on a greatest hits? Like
because definitely Prince. I mean, I'm not saying because Prince was somewhere else because he didn't want to put out a revolution track and there wasn't time. The moment had passed for it in his releases. Yeah,
I felt the same about For the Tears in Your Eyes as well.
Yeah. I mean,
but where would it go if you were putting it on a Prince album? Where would you put it?
Well, I guess that's a good question.
Because you have to ask yourself: is there anything in this on these 3 discs that you would take off? We'll say because of the period that everything was recorded across. To be devil's advocate, is there anything you would take off Parade and Sign of the Times and replace with something off this 3-disc set?
No, but that's because I'm very, very wedded to the artist's choice. And, I don't like playing those breakup albums.
I would struggle. I like to think not just because I'm used to a thing and I'm sort of encoded, but, the quality of what's on the albums can't be sort of underplayed, even though there's lots of other quality stuff kicking about.
I mean, All My Dreams is super, super quality track. What were we just talking about? Power Fantastic. There's others on here. I mean, Rebirth of the Flesh is incredible. What else?
I would have the last 2 tracks possibly on Sign of the Times. If I had to, if it was gun to my head, had to make a change, I would replace the last 2 tracks with the Crystal Ball.
Oh,
I mean, don't do that to us.
You would have taken off It's Gonna Be a Beautiful Night in the Door.
I mean, it's gonna be a beautiful night.
We got to get into that. We got to get into that 80s, 90s thing.
For the Crystal Ball. For Crystal Ball. Come on. Crystal Ball is possibly the best track.
Oh, you're kidding. A door?
It took me a while to get the door.
But I mean,
I would maybe swap it for Power Fantastic.
Wow.
That would be a gun to my head swap.
You know what? Leave it as it is. It was great.
I shouldn't have put this particular crucible out there, should I?
I said gun to, you said gun to the head. I mean, like, come on. Like,
You said gun to the head.
That's what I'm saying. If I had to, like, make some sort of change, I don't know. Crystal Ball is...
Andy's going to be sending me hate mail now saying, if you ever bring something up like this again.
I think if I had to make one change, I would put the horns from Dorothy Parker on all the tracks on some of the tracks.
Can you imagine them in a door? Sorry.
I think like Crystal Ball just doesn't sound like the end of an album to me.
Agreed.
It sounds like the start of an album.
It does start like the start of an album.
Yeah.
Like actually, there's so many variables to juggle. Like it is what you know, it's what you've got used to. But you can't change these things. They are what they are. But Crystal, it was hard for me to listen to this 7-inch mix of Crystal Ball at first because it's not a 7-inch song. But it was funny. I just couldn't relax into it at all. It just didn't sound like anything. And then about like maybe the 30th time round, it was like, hey, I really like that as a 3-minute song now. I mean, it doesn't take... I mean, I love the 10-minute version of Crystal Ball, but suddenly it just made sense to me, like a 3.5-minute version of Crystal Ball sounds fine.
But it's like, I think people would have thought that way about Computer Blue if they'd only ever heard the 12-inch one.
Yeah, I got
like,
on with
that. Like when you go back and listen to the album version of Computer Blue after I'd heard the full length version, and I feel the same way about Hallucination Rain after listening to the full one, and you just go, why on earth would you cut this? Like,
it makes perfect sense to me. I love the cut Computer Blue, and I love the long one, but the cut Computer Blue does it's a suite even in its 4.5 minutes or whatever. Whereas the cut Crystal Ball is just like it's the same thing for 3.5 minutes. It happens to be a delightful same thing, but it didn't. But at least Computer Blue, by your argument, contains a mini version of itself. It's a movement, and it does exactly the right things for the pace of the Purple Rain story. But this slab of Crystal Ball does not hint at its other manifestations. But I suddenly love it after like 30 listens.
I
have to say, it always has to be the 10-minute version for me.
Well, that's the right answer as well, definitely. Or just that's the right answer. But it's funny how suddenly it just made sense to me after not making any sense at all.
My only disappointment with it is because it's got nothing new on it. I was hoping, hope upon hope, that the 7-inch version would have the bit that's cut off of Crystal Ball, the full song. The bit with Susan going, brothers and sisters of the Purple Underground, bring peace of mind with the pop sound. Doom, 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 expert. That extended bit.
Yeah.
I wish that, and if that was on the 7-inch, I would have been like, all right, well, this 7-inch is, the 7-inch mix is bringing us something that the full 10-minute Crystal Ball doesn't. And it's interesting to know that Crystal Ball was edited because that implies it was considered for either an A-side or a B-side.
Seems that way, doesn't it?
Which is, so it's historically relevant that there's an edit, but it doesn't bring the new stuff. So I'm hoping that version of Crystal Ball with that extended bit and no strings is going to be on the parade.
I just don't see it. Here's my take on this, and now I am second guessing, but I think this is a rights thing. This is if you read the book that comes with this, if you're listening to the podcast, Crystal Ball is a huge part of the Sign of the Times narrative. It's one of the album configurations. It's a key track. This is the one it belongs on, and I don't think they had access to it because one of the longer versions has been released. And it bugs me to hell, but I think this is where you start getting really, like, movie star should be on this on this box set, maybe. But because it's been released, I can see why they didn't want to. But
I think they just didn't want to. They didn't see it. They didn't want to see it as repetition. But
yeah, well, same with the long crystal ball. To me, it's like, goddamn, repeat it. This is a big part of the story you're writing. Just put the 10-minute version on there. Give us the 7-inch for sure, for historical records, but put the 10-minute on there. It's weird not to.
Also, put in that the Dream Factory mix where it didn't have strings and had that extended bit of, like that was on the kind of rough configuration. I'd have been down for that 10 minutes.
Yeah, I don't know. The Super Deluxe edition is something that the hardcore fan is going to buy. So we've got the information to fill in the gaps, to not have it twice and realise that the crystal ball that was released in the 90s was... We know what that was, and we know that stuff was from all eras and it was like cherry-picked. I have to slightly disagree there. I wouldn't... Even though there is some parity with the other songs in terms of they all came from the same clutch in a sense, I would prefer to have new stuff at this stage. And I think casual listeners, who are the majority listeners who would have bought the standard remaster or just the deluxe with the B, as far as they're concerned, the B-sides and a few 12-inch stuff, then I think we're better getting new stuff, I have to say. But it's kind of irksome.
Yeah.
It steadily just sort of picks at the edges of your mind.
Yeah.
But again, that's what Spotify's for.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. But it strikes me there's a lot of it's hard to. This is a hard box set to talk about without going, I think this. But I also kind of think this. It's very hard to do. There's so many things crashing into each other, and it's such a complex part of his story.
Well, there's like a place in heaven.
Aspect of it. It's like you said, there's no story in 5 versions of You Can Call Me Al re-released that are all slightly different.
Well, I like that stuff too. To be fair, I like the song's development, but like with Prince, it would take about. No, I'm not kidding here. It would take about 4 box sets of this size to do everything.
Yeah. Well,
this is already a 13 LP box set.
Well, even like A Place in Heaven, the backwards one. I'm not gonna.
I love it.
Yeah, I love it. But there's also that. I was expecting the cut intro where you got Wendy and Lisa going, well, welcome to Holly Rock. Got any dreams you ain't using? And
that bothers me. That's not. Yeah, that bothers.
Yeah, that kind of bothered me. But then
it bothers me that We Can Funk, the Miko one, isn't on this, and it's a brilliant track. And they clearly haven't included that because they put We Can Fuck out on Purple Rain. I'm not saying we should find these people and beat some sense. No, I'm not advocating violence. No, I'm not saying anything of the sort. It's it's a difficult task because of the person they're trying to uphold.
It must be a nightmare for them. It must be an absolute nightmare for them in that sense that you're not going to please everyone.
Can you imagine if that was our job and we had to sit around the table and agree on these decisions? It would take a very long time.
Yeah, we've got to remember though, the Super Deluxe edition wasn't the major part of all this. The remaster of the album was what most people will experience, have the concentration for, and that kind of thing.
True.
This one's for people who are prepared to fork out a significant amount of money for something that is vast and sprawling. Yeah. And so it is niche. When all said and done, it is niche stuff.
This is how they pay This is how they pay to make this stuff for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and here's the thing. This is how vast and sprawling this whole box set is. We've gone probably an hour and 40 minutes, and we still haven't mentioned Wally.
Yeah. I can't formulate an opinion on Wally, the song. Perhaps it was lovely the amount it was concentrated on the official podcast, and I absolutely love the fact that the official podcast is so much more intrinsically enmeshed with this release than I just knew it was there, and you should listen to it. It's so enmeshed with this release in such a sort of a fundamental and subliminal way. But it's such a strange. I just find myself thinking, as I'm sure you guys do, God damn it, I want to listen to the original that Susan was trying to convince him not to erase, because that would give it even more context. And again, we talk about story. That would be such an amazing story in itself, But I can't make my mind up what I think of that song. As a tune, fantastic. Deeper than that, I can't find purchase yet.
I think possibly.
I'm actually the same as you, Paddy. It's one that I've listened to the podcast, and it's one that's talked about a lot. It's discussed a lot because of the story. And then when it actually comes to listening, I don't quite get what everybody else is quite latching onto. I know it's got like a real backstory and things like that, but as in musically as a track, it hasn't latched me the way it seems to so many other people.
So
I like it.
I
just don't understand it and can't create it. Sorry, Andy.
No, not at all. I think, sorry to talk over you, but because it's always the one that got away, because he erased it. So in our heads, now, by the way, Susan Rogers, she rates other tracks that I don't find that amazing, or she has very different tastes from things that I find astounding sometimes. So who knows, right? But it's always the one that got away. It's the big one. So in our heads, it exists as this absolute, Prince standing on his own shoulders or going right down to the bone, doing the culmination of his emotional work in one song. So it can be anything that we can imagine or anything that we can dream of. So it will never stand up to that. So what do you have to work with? You have to work with the thing he did 3 days later, which is this. So this is a great example for me of take it down off of that and just go, all right, I'll follow the narrative. To me, this is, again, a 27-year-old man who was heartbroken, happened to be a musical genius, so that's lucky, but heartbroken, who doesn't want to actually put himself on the line with his truth the way he did for the first recording. So he's now going to be disguising it and pulling his punches and just making it as a record of that track in case he wants that track. So given that he's pulling his punches and playing within himself rather than it's a performance of a performance, yeah? Mm. If I follow Susan's narrative, and if I try and imagine that, it's a performance of a real feeling.
Yeah.
That to me is interesting in itself. Now I think about why he's doing that, and that's quite emotive to me. That here's somebody who just wants to record it for the ages, but not that one. That was too real. It's
funny. It speaks to me of the time, those times in your life where you do a thing or say a thing to a person, which at the time is the absolute irresistible right thing to do and say emotionally, because you have the overriding emotional need to say it, and the blinkers are on to everything that might be take a step back. So the thought that, but the tantalizing thought that something that drove Prince to create this thing that we've never heard, that Susan Rogers allegedly begged him not to. What was that? It's like,
you can't.
Mind blown.
It's gone. But
it's intangible.
But you can reverse engineer it from listening to the performance. There are still bits to me in there that sound they give me hints of whatever Prince was genuinely feeling. But it's just there are bits where I think he's doing, as he's doing, quote unquote, the Broadway version of feeling that emotion. And there are other bits where I still think it seeps out. And the fact, I'm just reading into it and trying to listen to it as a song. The narrative still believes. I like this. Sorry, Chopin. Yeah.
No. You said something that really sparked something that I remembered when you talked about the Broadway version of an emotion. I think that is kind of pretty much what you got with this version of Wally. But kind of what that reminded me of, there's parts in the guitar part, and we're talking about this earlier on about the song tree and everything, and like this being from this and this kind of leading to this, there are guitar parts in that solo that remind me of Strays of the World.
Uh-huh.
And it's interesting that that's for a musical, the Glam Slam Ulysses, and that's for a musical thing, and, you know, quite bombastic, and it's quite, you know, it starts off in that low-key way and then builds to the same way. And it's interesting that you kind of talk about this as a Broadway version of the emotion, because I think, of this in the same way, he's kind of performing in the same way, performing the emotion in the same way. And I think there's a kind of, and also like kind of a song blueprint to that. There was just something when I was listening to it, like I was kind of like, there was like the wailing at the end. I was just like, oh, I'm sure that riff or a kind of very close version of that is in Strays of the World.
I mean, I can only imagine, as we all can, but my guess is that the original Wally wasn't so disguised. Basically, this seems to try and disguise what it's really about with different starting and stopping and little musical flourishes to take your eye off the main prize. And they're really lovely. And the melody's beautiful. La, 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 la. What am I gonna do? And like the very start of it, how is it? Oh, my life. What was the lyrics? All my life or something? Oh, my head is beautiful. There's so many fragments in there, but I think what he's trying to do is go, don't look at anyone. I think he's saying, don't look at anyone for too long. I don't want you to see or hear anything that I really meant, and I don't want to mean it.
But then it might not even...
I think if you concentrate on that song and go, actually, I'm sorry, you're doing a really good magic trick, but I'm going to watch your hands. I am not going to be distracted. Then it starts to cohere as a flow, a song that flows, and then I can hear it. But I have to watch that little trickster very carefully, because by my understanding, if we take Susan's story at face value, he is trying to hide. And I'm like, no, there's good shit in there.
Also, if you think about the timing, he's kind of obsessed with musicals at this point and doing a musical, because you've got the Cocoa Boys. This would make sense that it would be for that project. And also, you got to remember that, Madonna approached him off of doing Speed the Plow, and she's like, let's write some songs, and he's like, no, let's write a musical. And she says he fought me on the idea of just doing one pop song. He said he constantly wanted to do a whole musical with me, and then that forms into Graffiti Bridge and goes through
Yeah, there's definitely.
But it's interesting. I think this song, I can imagine, was probably if you look at the structure and everything, and being around the same time as like Cocoa Boys, it's like I'd be hard pressed to think that he wasn't considering this for that.
I think maybe he was going, I can rework this as something that's musically affecting, but in a different framework. It's not going to be the bare reveal of my soul. It's going to be a string pulling effect for theatre or something. I hear that, and I do. It really repays close attention. It does sound like a load of fragments at first. It really does. But the more you don't let it get away from you, the more you go, yeah, I see the through line. It's an amazing song, I think, even in this pretend version.
Yeah, because in his initial words of Wally, where'd you get those glasses? I'm looking for a hot girl. Nowhere within that sentiment is the emotion required for a crescendo this big.
Right.
And then it's not until it's like, because my girl's left me and I just want to... want someone else tonight. I just want to... And it's like, and once you...
It reminds me of the difference between Old Friends for Sale, 80s and 90s. The 90s one, you can hear the truth of the emotion on the 80s one. The 90s one is a bunch of lyrics that scans, that doesn't give anything away. And so it does not touch the sides. Now, if we had the original Wally here, I probably would be saying, just forget Wally number 2. It can fuck off forever. But because I don't, it makes it almost, it's so intriguing to me. What was he hiding? And I've only got the clues of the second version. Imagine if we didn't have Old Friends for Sale 1, and all we had was a story that he wrote a very personal song called Old Friends for Sale, which he destroyed and then re-recorded without any real commitment in the 90s. I'm not, and to me, it's exactly, Old Friends for Sale 2 is the same song, but it couldn't be further.
It's Prince paleontology. It's just like if you
paleontology.
Paleontology. Heard about the dinos? I know, just these are Cretaceous. No, but everybody wants to know what a dinosaur was like, but all we've got is the bones. But there's flesh on those bones that we will always fantasize about.
Everybody wants what they don't got. I really wish it was called. I wish it was called Everybody Wants to Know What a Dinosaur. What was that? Sorry. Everybody wants. Sorry, Leah.
Like a brontosaurus, she was packing it in. Like a brontosaurus.
Leah, what did you want to say?
Oh no, I was just enjoying the dinosaur talk.
we can do that all night.
I love Big Tall Wall.
Big Tall Wall?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always loved the fragment I had of the second version as a bootleg and wanted to hear more. And funnily enough, the first version is a real grower for me, the poppy one.
Yeah, it's another one that benefits from all the background and colour that the podcast give it. I'm sorry, I'm like a bloody broken record of the podcast, but it's strange little song, but you know exactly what it, you know exactly what the. I'm saying you do and you don't. You know her version of what she thinks it was, but another really good pop song in the same sense of train, teacher, that kind of thing. A bit of a curious. I think I've got a bit more road to travel with Big Tall Wall yet. But yeah, do like it. I think I prefer version 1 to version 2 at the moment. Andy might hate me for that, but
you're allowed.
All right.
I think it's interesting.
What about the ball?
Oh, can I just say something about Big Tall Wall?
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I think this is another one like when it's for the prosecution where you can hear the kind of the first one sounds like you kind of like 60s hippie pop kind of around would have fit on Around the World in a Day with a couple of more bells and whistles or kind of ethnic instruments. But then you can see the kind of, but it's retro looking sonically. And then Big Tall Wall, the new one, which was apparently considered for Graffiti Bridge. Now I can imagine knowing what he did with Bold Generation to New Power Generation and the kind of mix that he gave that, you can imagine Big Tall Wall, the second version, what that would have been like on Graffiti Bridge or Batman or something like that. And that would have been, I think that would have been killer, like finishing it off like that. And you can between the two, you can feel the tension. It's another one of the kind of, I've been learning about past music and stuff like that so much that I've kind of lost Prince, or I'm beginning to lose Prince, and I'm going to, and everything's a bit retro. Therefore, I need to strip it all back, get my drum machine, and just sing the song.
Yeah, can I just come in on that? I think the second version of Big Tall Wall is way more interesting sonically. It's Prince laying down a beat and playing with it and going, where could I go? Like as it goes on, the drum beat gets more and more abstract as well until it's just kind of just like a tuned, like electronic. I can't remember the rhythm, but it's like it becomes really abstract, tuned electronica, and it gets really quite radical.
Yeah. And
so that's the one that interests my mind. But you know what? The first one has this da 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 da. Da, 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 da. And it's like, that is a rubbish little riff, and I love it. big tool. And it's like, fuck, that's good. So like,
This reminded me, kidnap the Sandy Claus. I am under me.
It's such perfect rubbish little riff. It's so throwaway. But you know what? But you know what? Like, it never falters. It always insists on itself. Like, I'm the proudest beast in the jungle. La, da, 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 da. And I'm like, that is absolutely. I'm sorry, but I'm taking away. Forget the impressive mind food of Big Tall Wall Number 2. I just want to eat these crisps all day. Da, 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 da. I love it.
Well, that's the thing. The lyrics don't match the first one at all. Like, it didn't make sense until the second version.
Like, I'm gonna kill and chop you up. La, da, 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 da. I'm gonna murder your family. La, da, da, da,
Sounds like Hansel and Gretel.
I love it. It's rubbish brilliant, that first one.
Yeah.
Do you know what? Going back to kind of a point Chopin made earlier about potentially that track going on to Graffiti Bridge. There's 2 tracks on this release that I think would have been amazing, and I think I may have already mentioned this, but seeing Third Eye Girl reboot them, and that's Witness to the Prosecution, and I think Big Tall Wall, but with their acoustic sets that they did, the Third Eye Girl stuff, I can just see it working incredibly, and that was kind of my first thoughts when I heard those 2 tracks on this release.
Yeah, I think Rebirth of the Flash would have been good with Third Eye Girl.
Ooh.
Yeah.
No.
I think.
Yeah, you're hurting us, man. You're hurting us. You're hurting us, Rhonda.
Sorry.
You're killing
Oh, we got the
yourself, man. You're
purists
killing
in the house.
Sorry.
Oh, don't touch
that.
my precious songs.
I had the little sexy band play it, so you're like,
You're not gonna pull that one on us. Did you want to talk about the ball here? Because I love the ball.
That's
I
another one.
love the ball, and I love how love sexy it is. It's great.
I love sexy.
It's just I know, but with new lyrics.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, it's so much more though, isn't it? It's so odd. It's
Yeah.
like
It's
the
incredible.
ball has long been one of my favourite outtakes, and to me, it sounds like a psychedelic pinball machine in space. It just bounces off itself constantly, and things ping and pop, and it's just an amazing bit of sonic imagination. Chopin God.
What do you think, Paddy? That was an interesting expression.
Contextually, I mean, you've got, oh God, I can't believe I've forgotten the name of it. So you've got the song that morphed into New Power Generation.
Old Generation.
Thank you. But with the ball, and I know the ball is backing onto an absolute bona fide fucking amazing individual, innovative classic. And to no detriment to it, but I think it's even harder to frame it for me for those reasons. So go on, Andy.
Sorry, what on this set? It's next to what's it next to?
No, I mean it backs onto I Know. I was contextualizing that, and I Know for me and Love Sexy in general is quite an overpowering thing. So yeah, I do like the track. I've always liked the track. And it's when you hear the bits of I Know, it's so standout. Sometimes it sort of makes it a slightly jarring experience.
Is it a distraction?
A little bit, but whereas New Power Generation less so, because I just don't think it's a good track, but it isn't I Know.
Sorry, you're saying that you love I Know, yeah? And is that what you're saying? You love I Know?
Slightly, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I couldn't agree more with you. I love them both, and they don't bang into each other. I find it fascinating that one is like I Know is an incredible piece of sonic invention as well, and then it's just like, oh, by the way, if you want to put it through the underwater space pinball machine on another planet thing, then it sounds like the ball, and they're like really different filters. But then I want to add a third one into the mix, right? because we've also got It Bees Like That Sometimes on here, which is another part of the I Know jigsaw.
Yeah.
That's where it's like if you say, hey the ball, you're a really crazy guy on the street, right? You're maybe on Venice Beach, you're roller skating, that guy in Venice Beach who roller skates with a turban and a guitar and he's off his nut, and calm down the ball. Here, just drink a little bit of It Bees Like That Sometimes. Calm yourself down. Then maybe you get I Know.
See what happens. Yeah.
Those two have a
Are we now interbreeding Prince songs?
Well, Prince interbred them, really.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
It Bees Like That Sometimes is definitely also I Know.
Yeah.
And it's brilliant, but like what it has that the ball doesn't have is that kind of gentle or kind of generous preaching. The ball is just off its nut. We know that. It's great. Like, come to the ball. You're a crazy man. But like It Bees Like That Sometimes is like about how to live your life. Those of you on the way up, those of you on the way down. That's much more like the message and the kind of slightly quieter kind of invitation to come and join in a new revolution than the ball is.
You might have warmed me to the ball, actually, because not because I thought it was bad or anything else. Again, it's the ball, the kind of the lack of intelligibility. He'd done the low voice thing, I think, a little clearer on other tracks, and what it was is, I think it's the same thing that Paddy was going on about. I Know is a complete statement. It's an opening track. It's a complete statement, and the ball is just a nice track.
I think you're right.
Not in a boo. Oh, it's just a track, but it's like it's a thing unto it. It's a nice. It's a nice track.
I'll give it that it stands on its own right. I'm not implying that it sort of sounds like an experiment where he took the best bits and did something else. It's definitely. I love the idea of the pinball thing and the random pops. Very, very much so. But yeah, the vastness and the sheer gravitas of I Know on its own and in the context of the album is so absolute for me personally that it just makes the ball slightly jarring.
Well, no, that's cool. I'm so cool with all of these. There is no loser here. I've got them all, and I like them all in their different ways. But I am definitely It Bees Like That Sometimes is a really, really it's the sedation that the ball needs, and then you get I Know for me. I find them. I think because of the I Know being such a dynamic and bright and clear, not lyrically, but like sonic statement. It's punchy. It's bright. It's like I found the ball a bit stodgy as a mix. I would just call it heavy psychedelia, Prince style, and I love that.
It wasn't spacey enough for me to feel the psychedelia of it.
That's why I put the underwater bit in there when I always think about it. It's more like something like Parliament Funkadelic doing Motor Booty Affair.
And that's where you're selling me more on the ball than I previously had done. I still stand where I stand on.
I wish everyone could see the visuals. Some of us are like, I'm doing a triumphant fist punch, and Paddy's going, "Why you little?"
No, it's no. I know, right? Like I'm with Paddy. Like I know is the statement. He made the right decision. That was the.
I love them all. But I want to. Now that we've got onto this, it's amazing to me how often I've said this to you, Chopin, before down the pub in normal times.
Yeah.
How often he uses essentially the melody of I Know in so many different songs. It's basically the melody of It's Going to Be a Beautiful Night. It's just
there was another one that he did that as well on here.
It's just swung. I know there is a heaven, no there is a hell. We are beautiful. No time for da-da-da. No, we don't want to fight. Everybody, if you swing that, you get I Know. Everybody get up, ding, ding. It's going to be a beautiful night. I know, it's so close, right? And then, here's one that will blow you away, which I've mentioned to you, Show. It's Return of the Bump Squad as well. That's I Know, again. Can you give me the verses of Return of the Bump Squad, Shopes?
The return, another pound signing, you're coming late. Notice in the backyard, but I got to wait. Oh yeah, got
It's
to
the
get
same damn thing.
I need to rap, and this spells rape. I know. And then,
like, for me, it's a key template that
you're right.
One of my favourite things about Prince is that he can reuse stuff in songs that sound poles apart, but like he has some definite favourite things he goes back on, and like
the guitar riff from Raven to the Joy Fantastic that just gets used over and over again.
Exactly. But to actually build songs, like, you know, the way he builds 1999 and Manic Monday, essentially from the same melody, but they're poles apart. Yeah. It's not a diss, but like Bump Squad, Beautiful Night, I Know, The Ball, remember what it's called. It bees like that sometimes, and there's others where I Know pops up to me, to my way of hearing it.
Can I put forward another outtake that we haven't mentioned yet that has been killing me, that I love?
Yeah.
It's an Emotional Pump.
Impressive.
Great song.
The bass work.
Oh, it's hard to know where the bass starts and ends on that song. There seems to be about 9 basses at some point. Brilliant.
The thing for me with that is was that the one that he was recording for Bonnie Raitt?
No, it was the one he wanted to give Joni Mitchell, which is ridiculous.
Joni Mitchell one, yeah. I'm like, how the hell? I'd never see that going anywhere near Joni Mitchell.
Well, Joni Mitchell felt the same.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of lovely. It's kind of absolutely lovely that Prince couldn't see it.
It's adorable. I don't know if it was a wind-up or what. It's another great one for me where he seems to be, to me, it's just Prince playing with a melody and choosing the hardest note at any given time to sing, and I really like it. It's like, yeah, you thought I was going to zig, I'm going to zag.
Well, therein lies another dynamic to this box set, stuff that he didn't even consider for himself, like Jealous Girl, I Need a Man.
Yeah, and you know, this is some of the songs on here. In the Wrong Mood, this is Prince in general. When I'm listening to anything other than his super tip-top stuff, I'm like, yeah, that sounds like nothing. And then suddenly I hear it again, and I'm in the mood, and it all just sounds great. And the Bonnie Raitt songs on here either sound kind of like, yeah, or I just fall for them hook, line, and sinker and just really dig them. And like I can change on that, flip on a dime. But like the two that never really change are I Need a Man, which is just nice and classy. And there's something I like about Being Your Fool I really like. But the two in the middle, Promise to Be True and Jealous Girl, they just sound like so much dull trash to me. And then suddenly they don't, and I love them again. So weird. It's so odd.
That melody on I Need a Man, the money's all you got, I don't want it. I'm just like, that would have been like, I would love to have heard that on a radio. I'm sure that would have, I wouldn't have been a Prince fan when it came out, but I'm sure that melody would have hooked me. That
they're definitely much more conventional, those 4 songs. They're kind of Prince playing it straight and doing genre Motowny stuff. And you know, it's like I'm glad they're there, and then sometimes I'm not, and I go back and forth on them.
What Emotional Pump is like really weird is like, I get the idea of giving commercial songs to other people, but Joni Mitchell? Like giving an Emotional Pump to Joni Mitchell. I'm with you on that one. It's just, of all this, I would have given her Power Fantastic or something like that. Yeah. You know, or Place in Heaven. I could imagine her doing something interesting with both those songs, but Emotional Pump.
Fantastic's a good call, but like, it almost seems like an arrogant wind-up to try and to say to Joni Mitchell. You know, Emotional Pump is a great Prince song, but a horrible Joni Mitchell song. Horrible, just like completely not what she was about. It's so odd. Why would you do that?
I don't know. Can I Play With You? Is that the best Miles Davis song? I mean,
no, I think Can I Play With You is Prince trying to find something with Miles. But Emotional Pump just seems almost like a kind of snub, if you consider it as a Joni song. He must have known that she wasn't going to bite.
Maybe that's it. I mean, maybe it was less like a snub and more like intimidation. Like he just wanted to make sure it didn't get any further, just in case he got invested in it.
I don't know. It's a weird one. I mean, in its own right, I love it because it's all over. It's Prince all over, just doing the thing.
It's a damn.
Can I chuck in another one?
Absolutely.
Forever in My Life, early vocal version.
Sure.
There's nothing.
How did we feel about it?
There's nothing you can do to that song to ruin it. It's just a good song. You can even change the key, obviously. Not key, but you can even change the chords, and somehow or other, it's just a good song.
Well, again, he did the right thing. The abstracted version, where it's just an electronic heartbeat up against gospel, is incredible. This shows the strength of the song. The way that he throws those extra colours of the chording in is lovely, but he made the right choice. It's more interesting to me after the guitar, where the guitar coda comes in the album version and the song fades out. What's more interesting here is the extended run, where he just tries out different little templates of bits and pieces of business that ended up going into a lot of the extended live shows.
Yeah.
Ever in my life. He tries out little flourishes, and it's just a template for him.
Yeah. It's interesting. And
I love it. I think... Go on, Chopin.
No, go on, Leah, go on.
I think for me, the bit that excited me the most was hearing the actual backing vocals in time. I know that sounds like a really weird thing, but for me, that was what made the album version. It was the cherry on top. It's what made the entire track for me. Yeah. So to hear that, and again, like Paddy keeps bringing up the official podcast, when you hear the story about that being an accident and not being planned, it kind of adds to it. And they keep mentioning that accidents like that would always end up serving Prince's purpose. His aim, they'd use those things to achieve what he wanted with the song. And I think it's just incredible when you hear, almost because it sounds quite twee, I want to say, the earlier version, it comes across quite twee and quite lighthearted. But when you hear it, how it ended up with just the change of vocals alone, it just gives it this real credibility almost instantly. And it just makes it so much of an abstract piece.
Yeah, I think this version sounds like those For You demos, like Nadira and stuff like that. You know, those kind of, they got some really nice kind of like acoustic-y kind of simple groove. I mean, if the original version was on For You, it would not sit out of place to me. You know, it's very acoustic-y, kind of piano-y, conventional. Hadn't found like the vibe yet, but it's interesting. I think you're right. Like hearing the backing vocals as they were originally intended before the studio accident. It's like wanting to hear When Doves Cry with the bass. It's like it's not going to make it a better song. It clearly is not, but I want to hear it. And it's like hearing 1999 with the 3-part harmony all the way through. It's like and the percussion and the Latin percussion piece. It's not that I think that it's going to sound any better. I just want to hear it. I just want to hear. What
would we have had if fate hadn't intervened?
Exactly, and also it's part of it is his decision making, as like because that tells me something about his decision making.
Well, I mean, obviously the out of time backing vocals are an accident that he uses, but there's also so many interesting decisions he's made before you get to that point where, for example, in this early vocal he's sort of going la. How does that la da 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 da? Well, I can't remember how he sings. Da, 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 da. By the time he's got to his actual vocal, he's already kind of abstractified that to a much more like la da 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 da, which doesn't. It's just I don't know the.
It's not punching in the same place.
Sorry?
It's not punching in the same place.
No, he's putting in something a little bit cooler and more unexpected. He's any other gospel singer, quotation unquote, would be going la, and he just puts it right down to la da da da. Like he can't even. He's already making weird decisions long before great decisions.
Yeah.
Long before that accidental backing vocal thing happens. So he's already making the right choices to make magic happen.
To paraphrase you, he's taking it from a vertical melody to a horizontal melody, like in a sense.
And he is. He's making. He's going. That's expected. This is unexpected. That's where another color would use a bright color. There, I'm going to dull it there.
Okay, guys. Thank you for listening. I don't think we've got through all of them. I think it was a bit ambitious to think that we could. Not even touched on the DVD, the live concert, the remaster, and
box and the presentation.
The book. Oh, We'll do another 6 hours of talking at some point, but thank you so much. Thank you, Paddy. Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Andy, for joining us today. And yeah, we'll be back with more.
Chopin, and thanks to anybody who is listening to this, because there's a lot to talk about. We appreciate you.